Welcome to the Information Security Forum podcast. I'm your host, Tavia Gilbert.
Depending on your industry, you may be targeted by a different set of actors with different tactics. And I think as the CISO or as a security practitioner, you need to know what is targeting you, and you need to stay apprised of the threats that are out there and how you can help defend against them.
That was Jon Fisher, Managing Director at Lifars and a former FBI agent. In this episode of the ISF podcast, you'll hear the first part of ISF Managing Director Steve Durbin's interview with Jon, where they discuss current and future cyber threats, cooperating with law enforcement, and more.
So, Jon, thanks very much indeed for coming along and spending some time with us this morning. Just before we get started, tell me a little bit about your career and the sorts of things that you've been doing, because you've got a really varied resume here.
Sure, absolutely. So I would say that growing up, my goal was always the FBI. So everything I had done to this point in my career has been to get into the FBI and be productive and contributing member of the FBI. So when I left college, my thoughts were that if I started in law enforcement at the local level, that I would have a better shot of getting into the FBI. So I joined the Metropolitan Police Department in Washington, D.C. as my first step out of college. And sure enough, I think that was the stepping stone that got me into the FBI. Simultaneously, I enlisted in the Marine Corps Reserves right out of high school. I always knew I wanted to serve my country in that capacity as well. So for the past 18 years, I've been serving in a reserve capacity through 3 different branches of the military. I consider that professional ADD somewhat. I jumped from the Marine Corps to the Army to the Navy, all along the way picking up valuable skills and knowledge that have helped me succeed in both my FBI career and I think are helpful for me now in my civilian career.
Right. What was the attraction with the FBI? I mean, you say that that was always your ambition.
Yeah.
Why? What drove that?
There was nothing cooler than seeing the old movies, the FBI agents with the guns and the badges, kicking in doors and everything. There's no doubt about it. That is what attracted me when I was a kid. But, as I progressed in my career and as I grew a little older, I understood the FBI's mission, was very attracted to the mission. I always had a desire to serve, always wanted to help people. And I think I've done that throughout my career, just in different capacities. And I'm sure we'll get into a little bit. I think that even though I am now in the private sector outside of government, I think I do still serve in a capacity to the public in a sense.
So did Hollywood live up to... Or rather, did the real stuff live up to the Hollywood illusion of the FBI? I mean, did you get your blue jacket and that kind of thing?
Not even close. Not even close. I did get the blue jacket. However, I very rarely got to wear it, other than sitting behind a desk when it got a little chilly in the basement.
So, I mean, latterly at the FBI, you were the supervisory special agent in New York City for the cyber division. Tell us a little bit about that. What were the sorts of challenges that you saw? Because you were there for, 6 or 7 years, something like that?
Yeah, almost 8 years with the FBI in total. I started in our San Francisco division, and in 2015 transferred to our New York division. From there, I went down to our cyber division headquarters, which was actually in D.C., where I sat as a supervisor. So I have only seen high cost of living areas so far in my life.
Right.
In the San Francisco division, I actually started off working organized crime cases. So I had exposure to criminal groups and the activities that they were involved in. When I transferred to New York, I started working in more of a national security role. Mm-hmm. So more of a focus on nation-state actors. I had some experience working cyber counterterrorism cases back in 2015, 2016, when we saw a lot of website defacements and a lot of media attention around cyber terrorism. And then in 2017, I took a job down at our cyber division headquarters where I sat in a role as a liaison to intelligence agencies in the D.C. area. And from there was more in a managerial role. Mm-hmm. So our cases are all worked out of the field. And at the headquarters level, it's our responsibility to kind of coordinate between field offices, coordinate with different agencies, coordinate with law enforcement and intelligence partners overseas as well.
I mean, it's interesting you started with organized crime and then moved to nation state. If we put that into a cyber security environment, cyber threat, environment. Tell us a bit about how you see that having changed over the period that you were with the FBI. Has it become more complex, sophisticated? Have we seen cyber criminals move, much more towards nation states? Have we seen organized crime? Tell us a little bit about all that.
I think what's scary there is when we see the blended cases,
right,
where you might have nation-state actors who maybe moonlight as cyber criminals as well. From a sophistication standpoint, clearly the biggest threat is the nation-state actors. I mean, they have access to the resources, the tools, and the money to really be effective in the landscape. However, cyber criminals can target those who really aren't paying too much attention to their security. So, a lot of the ransomware attacks that we're seeing that can be very lucrative for criminals, a lot of the business email compromises, they're not targeting the Googles, the JP Morgan Chase, the Amazon of the world. They're targeting the smaller companies that might not have the resources for effective cybersecurity programs at this point.
What would jump out to you as being, exceptionally good practice for a CISO? So, CISOs listening to this might be thinking, well, Jon's got a huge amount of experience having watched all this. He must have got some really good tips for me. Are there any? Do you have any sort of words of wisdom to offer CISOs?
Yeah, security is tricky because you have to be constantly learning and evolving. The threats change very frequently. And I think we're seeing a boom on the commercial side in cyber threat intelligence. I don't think that should be ignored. Depending on your industry, you may be targeted by a different set of actors with different tactics. And I think as the CISO or as a security practitioner, you need to know what is targeting you, and you need to stay apprised of the threats that are out there and how you can help defend against them.
One of the things that a lot of people talk about is this need for increased cooperation with law enforcement, for instance. So having now been on both sides of the fence, how do you think we can make that happen better, more effectively?
Yeah, that's something that I can't harp on enough. And I know that would be kind of expected from somebody coming out of government with experience in the FBI. However, having seen both sides of the coin now, I will say that cooperation is of utmost importance. Even the smallest organizations need to make the relationships with Homeland Security, with the FBI, with any local or state entities that have cybersecurity programs. And the reason for that is that they serve as large data aggregators, and they put out intelligence products that help defend other networks. So you may have a very robust security program. You may be catching things. You may be stopping attacks or defending your network appropriately. That information needs to get passed on to the next company who maybe doesn't have the right resources to pay for sophisticated software or expensive threat intelligence programs. The FBI, the DHS, they offer free threat intelligence that the smaller CISOs can take advantage of and leverage. That information is all coming from, well, I wouldn't say all. A good amount of that information is coming from private sector collection. So
right.
When, a company is mitigating a threat, they're passing on the indicators to the FBI through relationships through either an ISAC or through InfraGard. And then that information is then getting passed over to the next company to help defend their network.
Right. So, I'm a CISO of a small, mid-sized company, and I'm listening to this, and I think that's a great idea. How do I get hold of that information? What are the steps I need to take to reach out to the FBI or DHS?
So there are certainly national programs that are very well known. I mean, a quick search online can point you in the right direction for reaching out to the FBI or DHS. I can speak to the FBI a lot better just from having been there. But every field office has a cyber program. The bigger ones like New York, San Francisco, LA have more agents, analysts working on their cyber programs. But even the smaller offices that we have in the FBI all have some sort of cyber program. You need to get in touch with your local FBI office, and that can be something as simple as picking up the phone and calling them and saying, hey, I'm a CISO of a company in Jackson, Mississippi, and I would like to speak to somebody in the cyber program to figure out how we can develop a relationship. And the FBI is happy to field those phone calls.
Okay. And are they sufficiently well staffed? Because I'm just imagining, that you could very well inundate these poor guys at the FBI with this kind of thing.
That's the beauty of the FBI's program. Though the field office may have fewer agents than some of the larger offices, our programs are nationwide. So if that office does not have the resources to handle your request, they will find the resources through another division. likely you are seeing some indicators in your security program. You're seeing something of interest to maybe another office. And the FBI in your local field office can help facilitate the conversations with maybe the office in Seattle or Boston or New York.
Right. Okay. So let's look a little bit further forward now, Jon. What do you see as some of the more complex or greatest threats over the coming 12, 18 months in the security space based on the kinds of things that you've been working on in the past?
Along with the expansion of cyber threat intel in the commercial space, I think we also run the risk of being inundated with data. The most successful programs are going to know how to parse through and use the data that is of value to them. I can give you an example of an engagement I saw where they had monitoring software, endpoint detection implemented. The problem is that the alerts were so many, the software wasn't tuned appropriately, and they started ignoring it. I had another engagement where they flat out told me that they had the solution implemented and nobody was watching it. So I think that as we are building these platforms that alert, as a CISO decides which program they would want to go with, which software they want to use, which vendor they want to use, they need to ensure that it is being tuned to their environment and it is catching what they are concerned most with. Clearly, ransomware, business email compromise is always a concern. But if you're in the financial industry, you may have more concerns over particular nation states. And again, knowing the landscape, knowing what threats are targeting you is what you're going to need to help develop the best program.
Thanks for listening to the first of our two-part interview with Jon Fisher, Managing Director of Lifars. Be sure to tune in for the next conversation, when Steve and Jon consider how to improve education in cybersecurity awareness, the best way to run a tabletop exercise, and more.
Your user is the weakest point. You can have the best security implementations in the world, but if your users are not trained and they click on the link, you're going to be in trouble.
We know you'll look forward to that conversation. As always, you can find our podcast on iTunes, Google Play, or wherever you listen to your podcasts, and you can find it on our website, securityforum.org, along with other resources to enhance the security of your organization.